what's going on? What's next? What is going to actually help me with this thing?
Research that's coming to us is so important because we are always looking for new mechanisms, new types of treatment that we can offer our tinnitus patients to help to reduce or mitigate their tinnitus.
We'll be talking about different neuromodulation therapies, biomarkers for tinnitus, sleep, and other important things. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Ben Thompson, audiologist and founder of Treble Health. I'm honored to welcome two leaders in our field, Dr. Tricia Scaglione, a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee for the American Tinnitus Association and audiologist with Treble Health in our Florida clinic, as well as Patrick Lynch with the American Tinnitus Association. He's leading the charity there, advancing tinnitus care and research. In this video and in this podcast, we'll be highlighting 5 research initiatives that were featured or a part of this year's Tinnitus Research Initiative conference in Seoul, South Korea, that Patrick attended. We'll be talking about different neuromodulation therapies, biomarkers for tinnitus, sleep, and other important things. So let's get started with the research project number 1, and this is with researcher Dr. William Sedley talking about non-invasive stimulation for early tinnitus. Patrick, take it away.
Yeah, so let me preface everything I say here today, Ben. First of all, thank you for the invite. The American Tinnitus Association, the ATA, is thrilled to even be able to have a conversation like this, and it's thanks to the support of both of you on this call, both from your volunteer time and your role as donors to the ATA, so thank you for that. Also, I'll preface everything by saying I'm a patient advocate here, so I am happy to be a leader of the ATA. I am far from someone who has a professional hearing healthcare background or a scientist. I'm quite the opposite. I'm a recovering attorney. So what I am is a sufferer of tinnitus. And so I share the point of view that I think many of your audience does as well, which is what's going on? What's next? What is going to actually help me with this thing? I'm a 3-time cancer survivor. I've had tinnitus since my first diagnosis with cancer as a teenager. So I empathize deeply with many of the emotions people go through in this journey. So great first question. So we're thrilled to, part of our mission is to involve funding of research toward the treatment and eventually solution to all of the questions around tinnitus. And so the more we understand how to screen a patient, the better equipped a provider is to try and give the patient some form of an answer. I think one of the most frustrating things that exists to this day for tinnitus patients is that the treatments can vary so wildly. It's every year in a different country around the world. This past year it was in Seoul, and that's sort of what we're talking about today are the 5 researchers who the ATA is proud to have funded that also happened to speak at this international conference. So you asked about William Sedley, who we're excited to have a really great relationship with. I was just with him in the UK this past weekend at their conference, Tinnitus UK. And he's basically looking, and again, these are layman's terms, but what he's looking into are early stage treatments of things like bimodal neuromodulation, which is fancy talk that you guys can break down better than I can. But whether getting involved earlier on makes a difference, and whether placebos, so think taking a sugar pill versus taking an actual treatment, have any effect on the result to the patient. So what does that mean? Basically, what we want to understand is, does this bimodal stimulation thing have any different kinds of validity to it if it's acted on earlier versus later in the patient life cycle? The update I have is the research is still ongoing. So there was an extension made on the research project itself. We don't have any concrete data that's come from it, but that's what William was talking about at the conference, was this topic of bimodal stimulation and when should it get involved? Does that even matter when it gets involved? That's where I can start us off, and then you guys might be able to go in a little bit deeper from there.
All right. And so this research that's coming to us from Dr. Sedley is so important because we are always looking for new mechanisms, new types of treatment that we can offer our tinnitus patients to help to reduce or mitigate their tinnitus. And certainly there's been a lot of conversation around this bimodal neuromodulation that's had quite a tremendous amount of success with other researchers and other devices that are on the market. So it would be certainly really exciting to see what Dr. Sedley and his team, what his research shows, and this could certainly have a tremendous impact to clinics worldwide.
Actually, Tricia, I have a question for you when it comes to this. One of the questions that they were trying to investigate, I believe, is whether early treatment with something like bimodal or multimodal is any different versus waiting and that treatment taking place later in the patient's journey. Is that something that that you guys have heard anything about, or that obviously we need to know more about it because of the study?
That's a great question, Patrick. And certainly if there is a time frame that a certain treatment would be more effective in, it would be certainly extremely important to know this information, because if there's something that shows, if research shows this needs to be implemented way earlier than maybe where we're being instructed to implement it at this time, then we certainly want to be able to deliver it to the patient at the appropriate window for highest efficacy. At this stage, to my greatest understanding, is that we don't have data available to show us that earlier is effective or less effective. So I think that this brings a very important question to the table.
Yeah, my thoughts are obviously earlier would be more effective than later. Tinnitus is a condition where it's not like breaking my arm where, hey, the bone's broken. Obviously, we should treat the bone break immediately. There's no point in waiting. Tinnitus is a neurological condition where sometimes waiting 3 weeks, it can resolve significantly on its own. That's an interesting part of this, where if we're trying to measure how well does stimulating sound through the ear in combination with gentle electrical or magnetic stimulation in the brain, when exactly should that be administered? Most of medicine would say, well, as soon as possible. But with tinnitus, we sometimes advise patients, if they've had it for just a few weeks, for example, and it's really significant, we might say, hey, let's not jump ahead and get a full treatment quite yet. Let's wait a few weeks to see how much this can resolve on its own before investing energy or financial investment into a treatment. So that'll be interesting to track with this specific study. And the bimodal neuromodulation is a huge field in tinnitus right now. And I think if we fast forward 10 or 15 years, we'll have a lot more specificity on what kind of modulation, what kind of devices, when exactly to use it, how often to use it. So it's an exciting time. Patrick, I wanted to ask you, anything else from Dr. Sedley that you want to touch on?
Just anecdotally, having met and spoken with Dr. Sedley a number of times in a number of different forums, he is a young, energetic researcher who cares quite deeply about tinnitus and the patients who are suffering with it. And so I think he shares a lot of the perspectives that I, as a patient, and our fellow patients that we represent feel, which is we all know more needs to be done, and trying to work with as many folks as he can around the world, which goes for everyone that we're going to talk about today. But Dr. Sedley certainly is at the forefront of trying to make sure we find the next possible solution as quickly as possible with as much data as we possibly can.
Awesome. Next up on our list, we're going to jump to Dr. Robin Guillard, who is speaking about sleep and intermittent tinnitus. Let's go to you, Patrick.
All of these folks presented at TRI and Seoul, which, by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention. The ATA is actually hosting a version of this conference with TRI in 2027 here in the United States. Details to come. So, yeah, Robin Guillard presented on his research that we were a big part of funding. And again, layman's explanation, Robin's very interested in the effect that sleep does or does not have on tinnitus. So we've all heard in our journey as patients the importance of things like sleep, stress, nutrition, all potentially playing a role in the severity of the tinnitus that we experience day to day. Robin's trying to get data on, well, let's learn a little bit more about this sleep piece. And he's actually found some really interesting stuff. He's analyzed so far 197 different naps using some brain and heart monitoring. And what he's finding are very clear patterns that link tinnitus relief to sleep rhythms and brain activity, theta and sigma waves. What he shared with us is that he's identified a possible link to a 2.5 and a 4.5 day cycle in the loudness of tinnitus. And he's also seen that higher stress levels, i.e. elevated heart rate, do seem to worsen the tinnitus after particular types of naps. So what does any of this mean? Well, first of all, he's still got some time to go to present his final results to us. But what we think we're seeing here is that there's scientific validation. There's evidence here to the patient experiencing a fluctuation in their tinnitus, it getting worse or better based on the level of sleep they're getting. What does this mean long term? It basically means that if we know that sleep is connected to the experience of tinnitus, the fluctuation of tinnitus, this could lead to additional forms of treatment that mimic sleep-driven relief mechanisms, meaning we have data that shows sleep is linked to tinnitus now, thanks to Robin. And now we can potentially either explore or start seeing the effects of making sleep a more focused part of patient treatment.
Tricia, have you seen patients who say, my tinnitus is so loud after a nap, or after, when I wake up in the morning, it's so loud?
Yeah, absolutely. Arguably, I would say that 90% of my patients that I see with tinnitus also have issues with sleep linked to their tinnitus. And it's really not uncommon for the patients to tell me exactly what you just asked. It's worse when I wake up. It's worse after I take a nap. And then we really have to work on techniques to help to improve the tinnitus, improve their distraction, lower their disturbance levels in those types of situations. Now, there's a lot of things that could contribute as to why that tinnitus is perceived greater when they wake up. Is it the quiet environment that they are in? Maybe they're grinding their teeth at night. Perhaps they had poor sleep that contributed to this louder perception of the tinnitus. But regardless, I think that Robin's study is really exciting. I've seen him present at a number of different TRI conferences and other tinnitus. I've read his work, and I think it's so impactful for our patient population because sleep disturbance is just reported so frequently with this population.
Definitely. That's what I see working with patients and having conversations as well. Sleep may be the primary problem that is caused by tinnitus. And the brain is involved with sleep. One thing I want to highlight here is that right now, we are recommending to some patients to follow a sleep protocol. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI, is a very effective program that works quite well for patients. So I'm curious how this research on sleep and intermittent tinnitus may impact recommendations to patients, maybe create a new protocol they should follow. Maybe there's medication involved. Maybe there's neurological perspectives involved. So really fascinating.
And it can certainly help to only continue to strengthen our relationships with our other healthcare providers in the field, such as sleep medicine specialists, who we already have that relationship with our tinnitus patients. So this just gives us more information on how together we can collaborate and really help improve that experience for the patient.
Next up, we have researcher number 3, Dr. Christopher Sideroth, and the topic is the objective diagnosis of tinnitus. How can we measure it more than just questionnaires? Patrick?
This is an awesome one. First of all, Christopher is an incredibly talented individual. Again, younger researcher, cares deeply about tinnitus and the patients themselves, which gives me a lot of hope as someone who, again, is struggling with tinnitus, but also representing those of us who want some movement on the treatment side. So he's in the middle of a 2-year project for us right now. And layman's terms, he's looking to help the quote-unquote objective diagnosis of tinnitus. Why does that even matter? Well, as of right now, technically, and this is from my experience as a recovering attorney too, not being able to objectively diagnose a condition has a lot of impacts for all of us that we may not necessarily care or think about in our day-to-day. The primary one is with things like insurance. So at the end of the day, when someone has to pay a bill, the folks who don't feel like paying the bill will say, well, prove it. Prove to me the car accident happened. Prove to me you weren't at fault at the traffic light. In the form of healthcare, prove to me that you have this condition and that what you want treatment for helps whatever condition you're claiming you have. So unfortunately, right now, there's no really reliable, agreed upon way to biologically, and you guys correct me if I'm misspeaking here, please. My understanding is that there is no concrete, universally agreed upon way to biologically, objectively diagnose a patient with tinnitus, like a blood test would for leukemia. And so that has implications for all of us in terms of treatment, reimbursement, funding, etc., even funding for future research projects. So Christopher's trying to, in a very unique way, examine maybe there are a handful of cases where we can take a brain scan, for example, and say, yes, this brain scan combined with this audiogram may actually prove that the patient who says they have tinnitus really does have tinnitus. So we're in the middle of his research project right now. And what I can update you on is that he's recruited about 84 different participants, which is a pretty good sample size. He's already analyzed about 40 of these participants and their EEGs. And he's already finding key differences between hearing loss and tinnitus frequency. His early results haven't shown significant diagnostic differences, but again, we're still early days here, and the full analysis is still in progress. At the end of this research project, regardless of what the data shows, the need is still there, which is this dire need for all of us, the patients, the providers, and even the insurers. In the government, the research funders, everybody, all of us, we need an objective biomarker for tinnitus. And his research is trying to see if we can find a little bit of light to put us down that path.
So, Tricia, when you're working with patients in Florida, what do you currently use to measure tinnitus?
That's a great question. So a lot of it is subjectively. What is the patient reporting to us of what does it sound like? How loud is it? What is their perception level of it? But we can also then take some diagnostic measures such as otoacoustic emission testing, where we're looking at hair cells. We can do an audiogram to test the function of hearing. That's really looking at the auditory system. That doesn't give us objective information specific to the tinnitus. That's, again, telling us how all the parts of the ear and the auditory system are working. And if we see some dysfunction, we can perhaps correlate it to the onset of the tinnitus or the subjective report of the tinnitus. We also have questionnaires. I know Patrick had mentioned the questionnaires at the beginning when he was starting to share this study, and we use subjective questionnaires like the Tinnitus Functional Index that we have patients rate their tinnitus and how it's impacting their quality of life. So these are some ways that we can measure the tinnitus in a typical clinical setting. You can go with a little bit more advanced testing and do a tinnitus assessment where we are having the patient identify the tinnitus pitch or the ability for us to, let's just say, mask it or cover it. Again, technically, these aren't real firm objective measures like the study that Christopher is trying to execute right now with getting that concrete data from those brain waves through the ABR, the EEG, those types of studies.
Hey, it's Dr. Ben and Dr. Priscilla. I'm here at our San Francisco Treble Health Tinnitus Treatment Clinic in the sound booth. I wanted everyone to know that if you are looking for a way to reduce your tinnitus, one of the best ways to do that is talking to a specialist on my team. We offer free consultations. So click the link below if you'd like to have a telehealth consultation from home, where you can speak to someone on my team who can guide you towards whatever solution is appropriate in your case. Click the link right below to schedule that consultation, and we'll see you there. Now back to the video. Yeah, so when I think of other conditions that can be found on imaging studies like an MRI, it's very concrete, black or white. Is there a growth in the auditory nerve? Is there not? Is there an X-ray? Is there a broken bone? Is there not? With tinnitus, it's much more of a scale of severity. Speaking with patients on a quick level, we can ask, hey, on a 1 to 10 scale, 1 not a problem at all, 10 an extreme problem, how significant is your tinnitus? That gives us a really quick number. But still, even in a clinic, we're mostly using comprehensive, research-backed, evidence-based questionnaires to measure pre and post-treatment effectiveness. And that does line up with the patient subjectively saying, yes, I am better. However, it'd be amazing if someone did not have to, kind of influence or give subjective information. It'd be amazing if it was, let's take an objective measure at the beginning. If the person's in a depressed mood at the time versus a really optimistic and hopeful mood, that doesn't affect it at all. Like a truly objective measure is what we're going for. But it's hard because tinnitus is, inside of the head. It's in the brain. It's affected by different brain systems. The researchers here were using different measures. So love to see that, and hopefully we can see more of it. I did want to take this time to share to everyone listening here that Treble Health, Tricia, myself are supporters of The ATA, American Tinnitus Association, it's a charity organization that, as you can see here in this talk, is literally funding research that could change the outcome for future tinnitus patients. So I wanted to explain to you guys that if you're here on YouTube, we're going to make this YouTube video a donation video. We're trying to raise $500 on this video. And also, if you're not on YouTube, you can go to ata.org. Patrick, could you tell us, what exactly would happen if individuals did donate to the ATA, hopefully to support research like this?
Yeah, so this is my wheelhouse, right? So we've been around for 54 years. We've been at this for a long time. We have done some incredible things, and we were founded by a researcher who was tired of hearing that patients were being told, learn to live with it. Of course, as we all know, it's over 50 years later, and myself included, patients are still being told, learn to live with it. So that's what we exist to eliminate from happening. What does a dollar go to? Well, today we're a 4 out of 4 star charity on Charity Navigator, which is an objective rating of a charity and where their dollars go and how their dollars are spent. So, number one, your $1 donation is an investment in a charity that's objectively rated as being worthwhile. But more importantly, the dollars go to our 3 primary focuses. So today we're talking about research. Literally in the last year, and I've been around with the organization for just over a year, we've already funded $1 million in research, some of which we're talking about here today. Beyond that, we have patient-provider education that we're working on and looking to grow. So what does that mean? Making sure that when a patient does go to, maybe they don't go to an audiologist at first, maybe they go to an ENT, maybe they go to a nutritionist, maybe they go to a psychotherapist. The ATA's role is to make sure we're providing reliable information to the providers so that even if they don't specialize in tinnitus, they at least have some 101 level information on where to send patients next. As I'm sure the patients who are watching this video know, that's an incredibly important part of provider care. And then finally, patient resources. So we have a 1-800 hotline, for example, that if folks go to ata.org, they'll see a 1-800 line at the top right-hand corner of the window. That number does everything from provide patients with reliable information to provide callbacks with counselors who might be able to talk with you for a few minutes and help you find a provider in your area who might be able to know more, as well as providing more patient resources. So we're in the middle of redoing our website, for example. So there's going to be a new website coming soon, organizing our information. And then, of course, it helps fund one of the things we're most well known for, and one of the reasons we were founded. We actually started off with newsletters. Today, it's a fancy magazine called Tinnitus Today that goes out 3 times a year. We're very proud of the work that goes behind this magazine. But as everybody knows, there's a reason why people say print is dead. This is a very expensive medium for us to keep up. So the only reason we're able to put together the content in this magazine, print the magazine, and send it through something called the U.S. Postal Service, snail mail, all of those things are getting more and more increasingly expensive. It's part of our mission. But it does require donor support. So the 3 things we do, research, provider education, and patient support, all require philanthropic dollars. So whether it's $1 or $1 million, those are the 3 areas the ATA use donor support.
Well, guys, we would encourage for anyone who has the means to consider doing so. It would mean a lot. And you can do so on YouTube under this video. There should be a donation button, or go over to ata.org. All right, we have 2 more left from the 5 talks at the International Tinnitus Conference. We have next up Dr. Jose Lopez Escamez, the genetics of tinnitus. Wondering, are there any possible genetic markers or risk factors for severe tinnitus? Patrick, what did you find there?
Thanks, Ben. And let me also quickly clarify, too, some of these folks, while they were speaking at TRI, they may not have been speaking about these particular research projects, which might be different. So, for example, Dr. Lopez Escamez is still in the middle of his research project for us. So he was speaking on a slightly different topic. But all of these folks did speak at TRI. So I just want to clarify that because some of these research projects are still ongoing, like Dr. Lopez Escamez's. So what's really cool about this one is, as we all know, how complicated tinnitus is, and it can affect multiple different areas of our body or be coming from multiple different areas. So he's trying to find out, are there genetic, for lack of a better term, are there genetic markers here that are showing us an absolute connection between cognitive decline and tinnitus patients? Do we know at the genetic level that one is connected to the other? So far, he has found 108 genes that are definitely linked to severe tinnitus, likely involving genetic mutations. He's also separately identified other genes that are tied to cognitive decline in tinnitus patients. This doesn't mean, let me be clear, this does not mean one does cause the other. This is what we're trying to look into. Is anything related here at the genetic level? So he's working on a peer-reviewed publication that he's hoping will come out in late 2025. What is the broader impact of this? First, let me reemphasize again. We are not saying that there is 1,000% one thing causing the other. We're trying to figure that out now. So we've heard some of these words used in the same sentence before. What this project is trying to do is see, is there any scientific validity to this at the genetic level? So this would be, if the data comes out, it could be one of the first studies that are linking tinnitus, hyperacusis, and cognitive decline at the genetic level, which would end up hypothetically leading to more personalized treatment strategies and maybe even early detection of other related issues to tinnitus. So backing it up a minute and trying to think about the broader impact, one of the best analogies I've ever heard about tinnitus and the way to think about it, and again, you two are experts, so correct me if I'm wrong, but think about tinnitus like a check engine light for the brain and the body. So tinnitus may not necessarily be an actual disease in and of itself, but it is a marker to the body that you need to go to a doctor and find out what's happening here. So in this case, what Dr. Lopez-Escomes is trying to find out is, do we have data that are linking tinnitus, hyperacusis, and cognitive decline at the genetic level? Why does that matter? Because if you know you have a genetic disorder, and I can speak anecdotally, for example, I have, ironically, my last name is Lynch, but I have something called Lynch syndrome. What does that mean? It means some guy named Dr. Lynch found out that there are genetic mutations that affect things like the likelihood to develop colon cancer. So I know now, because of my genetic mutation, I have to go every year and get a colonoscopy done instead of every 5 years because I have this genetic mutation. Imagine if we knew there was a genetic mutation tied to either tinnitus and or cognitive decline. You would know you'd be looking out for certain symptoms ahead of time, more annually with your physician. So that's an oversimplification of what his study is looking to complete and get some data behind.
Wow, fascinating. Now, Tricia, when I think of this, I think, okay, this seems pretty far out. You know, some research projects are, this could be relevant in the next 5 years. Others are, okay, some maybe 10 or 20 years. Where do you see the actual timeline of this? Because the idea of genetic testing for tinnitus does not seem like it's going to happen tomorrow.
You know, I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but I would agree with you. I feel like I feel like we have not been able to really crack that genetic code on tinnitus yet. But as an audiologist, as a tinnitus specialist, as somebody who has tinnitus themselves, and as an ATA scientific advisory committee member who, again, helps to review all of these grant submissions and identify who to find. I am very hopeful that we find the answer and that information. What is that genetic link? And, and to find it sooner rather than later. But being realistic, I see this something down the line, but stay very hopeful that information's coming sooner than later.
Yeah. And very relevant what you shared, Patrick, how, you're living an example of early testing and detection can lead to, better health outcomes. So really important what you shared. Let's jump to the next one, which is the Dr. Anne-Marie Vanderwall. This is number 5 on our list. And this is looking at tinnitus subtypes. That's interesting. So it's suggesting that there's not just one type of tinnitus. Patrick, let's have you go first, and then Tricia and I can share our experience working with patients with various subtypes.
Yeah, incredibly, just anecdotally speaking, you guys might actually have a lot of really interesting stories and insight into what the goal here is. But the point of this study is to see if we can create a screening tool for providers for tinnitus subtypes. So think of it like a checklist. Are there ways to figure out if this is tinnitus, for example, related to TMJ, the clenching of the jaw when you're sleeping at night? If you know, for example, TMJ is somehow inducing tinnitus or making your tinnitus worse, then your doctor's going to tell you maybe you should get a mouth guard. Conversely, if you can figure out that your tinnitus might become not related to TMJ at all, the doctor doesn't need to spend time examining whether or not you might need something like a mouth guard. So the more we understand how to screen a patient, the better equipped a provider is to try and give the patient some form of an answer. I think one of the most frustrating things that exists to this day for tinnitus patients is that the treatments can vary so wildly. But that's also the importance of why, the ATA exists, so we can have some reliable source of information out there, because there's so many different opinions. We want to be a reliable source of information. So providing something like a reliable screening tool that we know has some objectivity to it is within that scope of purpose. I think going down the line, understanding the right treatment for a type of tinnitus. So if there are different types of tinnitus and different causes to the tinnitus, maybe you need to sleep more. Maybe you need meditation. Maybe it really is just hearing loss and you need something to compensate for your hearing loss. We can't know that until you and your provider sort of examine where it is your tinnitus may or may not be coming from. And so, again, speaking as a cancer survivor, speaking as a broken bone survivor, and having had leg surgery, there are certain things in my life medically that I've experienced beyond my tinnitus where there isn't a cure. As a matter of fact, most things don't have a cure. There's still no cure for cancer. And yet I'm here 30 years past my first diagnosis with cancer talking about the treatments I've had, the journeys I've gone through, the different types of specialists I've had to see, all for one diagnosis of cancer, but many different doctors, many different treatments have been involved. And all of those treatments, all of those providers had some form of a questionnaire for me. What are you experiencing it? When are you experiencing it? What were you doing before, during, and after? And so what Anne-Marie Vanderwall is trying to examine here is a little bit more specific. Is there a checklist that clinicians can use, for example, with stuff related to TMJ, that can help the patient and provider together examine, all right, this is a specific form of tinnitus, and these are likely treatment options for the patient.
I love it. Essentially, this helps what's called differential diagnosis, where the doctor can say, the condition is tinnitus. What is the cause or multiple causes impacting it? Very recent in my life here, because just last week in the California Audiology Conference, I gave a talk called Root Causes of Tinnitus, a Clinician's Guide to Central, Cochlear, and Somatic Subtypes, where I explained that through my experience and my mentors and my understanding of tinnitus patients, that there's three common root causes of tinnitus that we called central tinnitus, cochlear tinnitus, and somatic tinnitus. Central tinnitus typically linked to stress in the central nervous system, cochlear tinnitus, typically hearing loss, and somatic tinnitus, typically the jaw or the neck. There's a big problem that many doctors will just say, oh, Mr. Smith, you came in here with a problem of tinnitus. Well, I did your hearing test. Your tinnitus is caused by your hearing loss. And that's it. And they won't investigate or even think that there's other potential causes here. And therefore they will miss the most accurate treatment and most effective treatment. So I love what Dr. Vanderwall's doing here with the discussion around subtypes. And clearly I'm very aligned with my talk last week. Tricia, how do you approach this with patients? And do you believe that subtyping the tinnitus makes your treatment more effective?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm of, certainly the same school of the multiple subtypes. And depending on the subtypes, that's really going to help me devise that individualized care plan. That an individual who has a subtype of somatic tinnitus, maybe we share some similar recommendations of sound therapy for helping to help stress related to the tinnitus is somebody who maybe has central tinnitus. But if somebody has that somatic component as well, we're going to talk about what that means and how that's going to be managed a little bit different for them. Meaning, am I going to refer them out to another specialist that is going to help evaluate and treat that suspected TMJ or that cervical involvement? versus somebody, it might be cochlear. Maybe we need to talk about amplification or a different modality of treatment for them. So subtyping is very, very important. And Anne-Marie's tool here for helping clinicians screen for, in this case specifically, somatic components is very, very important. Clinicians, if they're individuals who aren't really familiar with working with tinnitus, I feel like these patients can be overlooked very easily, and not because the provider's being negligent. They just may not realize that there are these screening tools, there are these subtypes for tinnitus, and something like a very, very simple checklist tool can help to educate clinicians, whether it's an ENT, an audiologist that doesn't specialize in tinnitus, or an audiologist who's newly specializing into tinnitus, healthcare providers, your PCP, your family medicine specialists, the list could go on. This tool could be applicable for many, many healthcare providers. So certainly can provide a lot of promise there.
And if the last research article or the research project was more of a long-term play, this one can be very short-term and used immediately. All right, guys, you're here with Tricia Scaglione and Ben Thompson. We're audiologists at Treble Health. Tricia's in Florida at our clinic. I'm here in San Francisco at our clinic. We're here with Patrick Lynch with the American Tinnitus Association. Guys, what do you think is the future here with funding tinnitus research? So we have next year's research projects coming up. What are your guys' thoughts on where the ATA should be funding more dollars into research, or just the tinnitus community in general? What kind of research seems the most promising for us?
Yeah, and Ben, if I could just take 2 minutes, if folks are still tuned in at this point into the video, I want to say thank you. Clearly, you're very interested if you made it this far into our video, and I want to take a moment to thank Treble Health, you, Ben, and Tricia, you both, each individually, personally, for being donors to the ATA, and for lack of a better term, putting your money where your mouth is. Actions speak louder than words with tinnitus. And so, as Kennedy once famously said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. I think that's applicable here with the ATA. We all share this pent-up desire for there to be an answer, for there to be more. There should be more research here. There should be more treatment there. This is true. The ATA exists to make that happen. The only catch is we cannot give what we do not have. And so thanks to folks like yourself who give $1, who donate time, Tricia, who volunteers on our scientific advisory committee, evaluates applications, votes on the scientific validity of where we should invest our research, recommends it to our board, who are incredible volunteers of ours. It takes an army. And so you guys are a part of that today, and things like today are a big part of that. So on behalf of our 50 million plus Americans who have tinnitus that we represent, thanks to both of you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. It's an honor being able to serve the ATA and patients that come in every day and they ask, why is there not a cure? And, what's going on there? Serving on the ATA in my role, I think really helps to be able to deliver that message that there are clinicians, there are researchers, there are so many people around the world that are truly dedicated to spending their lives trying to research and find cures. And if we don't have a cure, find management for the tinnitus and better understanding of the tinnitus. So if you're watching this now, you know that so many people are dedicated, including Patrick, myself, and Ben, to helping patients like yourself improve their tinnitus and hopefully cure the tinnitus. Ben, you asked the question of, where are we going with research? I think that, when I'm reviewing grants, I'm looking at all different considerations, and I love to see research that can be applied right away, like Anne-Marie's checklist tool, just like you were saying, or a research study that might take some more time, but that pacing ourselves to get the answer, like the genetic study that Jose is engaged in. I think what would be really interesting as we come down the pipeline is how we integrate AI. I think there's been great advancements with AI recently, just globally in all different care, whether it's healthcare, whether it's in tech, in business. And I think that AI is going to continue to be refined and implemented into a lot of the studies that we do to help us more efficiently categorize our data or identify these biomarkers, identify these genome sequences and just be a tool for us to getting answers hopefully sooner and more efficiently. So
For where we should fund more research, I'm thinking it's into devices, neurological stimulation devices, things that are trying to get close to the tinnitus, potentially electrical stimulation around the cochlea, affecting patients with tinnitus and hearing loss, potentially non-invasive brain stimulation type approaches. I think it's the technology, it's the devices that might create sort of a step function in terms of options that we can use. The non-device or non-solution focused research projects, I'm not sure how much value those are going to create. They might create incremental value, but potentially taking some bets or risks on more device or treatment solution focused approaches could potentially create a step function, but it's really hard. So I think there's less of a hit rate. It's kind of like higher risk, higher reward investing in those types of projects.
Yeah, you're both making really good points about where does this all go. And in my first year as CEO, I've certainly heard no shortage of opinions on where the dollar should be going. There's obviously very limited, at least from the ATA side, there's a very limited amount of money to go around right now. It's just the nature. It's a business at the end of the day, just like anything else. And so, I may, for example, personally, I may want a McLaren or an F1 race car in my driveway, but the fact of the matter is I can afford the Honda Accord, not the McLaren. And so you make personal choices based on your budget, right? The ATA has to do the same thing. However, if we had a magic wand, if suddenly 15 different multi-billionaires and countries got together and said, where do you want all of this money to go? Unlimited spigot. I think one of the really interesting areas, in addition to devices and concrete things that a person can buy or use, is the idea of something called translational research, which I know you both are very familiar with, but I wasn't until I got involved in healthcare law and fundraising. The idea that instead of a small grant to fund a theory that is a 15-year project down the line, translational research tries to go what we call bench to bedside. So go from the theory to the patient itself directly and see if there are concrete things, whether they're devices or treatments that can come. Unfortunately, this translational research is also wildly expensive. We're talking in the millions of dollars. So we're very proud, for example, in the last 12 months to have funded $1 million in research. It sounds like a lot of money. But when you're talking about things like translational research, those are multi-million-dollar projects. So now you're talking about, is the government going to fund a study? Are there private foundations that are interested in funding studies? It's our job to try and find that money. But also, it's our job to try and help suggest where we think it should go. And in the meantime, we're trying to fund what we think are worthwhile and things that can have an impact now. So the only thing stopping us is the support of folks around us. So if you know a company, a family member, maybe even someone in the government who can influence some governmental funding, do your part, be part of the solution, and don't lose hope. Just because some of these things are talking about 15 years out doesn't mean it's not a good thing. And again, I can speak anecdotally as a cancer survivor. There were genetic studies done in the 60s on colon cancer that affect the treatment I get today as a colon cancer survivor. Same thing with leukemia, same thing for diabetes patients, lung disease, heart disease. There are way more diseases in our world that don't have a cure than you'd believe. So don't be disheartened about the fact that today there isn't a cure. Why can't there be one today? There are lots of things that are in that scenario. What we can do is focus on what will treat us, what will treat you. And Ben, you make a great point. Where can we make some immediate impact on this research? And so I think translational research, in addition to AI, which is here, so we have all this data, let's analyze it quicker. And then devices, of course. If there's a device or some concrete thing that we can do tomorrow, what is it and how do we find it?
Well, thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Tricia. And let's keep helping people with tinnitus. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.